Chapter 957. When he regained consciousness, Noah realized that he was floating in midair. His body was illusory. His surroundings were dark. He felt like he was in a strange place. However, his consciousness was still quite clear. Under such circumstances, Noah witnessed the pinnacle of the battle in the dark space from the perspective of God. Roar! In the dark fortress, the demon king, whose body was burning with black flames, let out a roar that did not sound like a human's voice. In his hand, he gripped a completely black knight's sword tightly. Dense black gas surged around his body, bringing with it gusts of wind that swirled in the surrounding space. Finally, it gathered on the sword. Roar! In the low roar that sounded like a ferocious beast, the demon king, whose body was shrouded in ominous black gas, suddenly shook his sword-wielding arm. Like a flash of black lightning, his body instantly shot forward. In front of the demon king of disaster was a young girl holding a steel sword shining with silver light. She was called the Saintess of Salvation by the later generations. She fearlessly pointed her sword at the demon king that was charging towards her. Her body was surrounded by a beautiful phosphorescent light called divine might, which was completely different from the demon king's. The black lightning that shot toward the Saintess of Salvation was terrifyingly fast. One could only vaguely see a black line flash in front of their eyes. The demon king, whose body was shrouded in ominous black gas, arrived in front of the Saintess. He mercilessly slashed with the black knight's sword at the Saintess' head with a sonic boom. Clang! In the next moment, the black knight's sword and the shining silver sword collided fiercely, setting off a shocking shockwave that shook the surroundings. Then, the heart-trembling collision began. Clang, clang, clang! Along with the demon king's ferocious roar, the pitch-black knight's sword was swung out like a heavy hammer. Using the most violent method, it mercilessly slashed towards the delicate and pitiful girl. However, no matter how heavy the slashes were, the existence who was known as the Saintess of Salvation by the later generations was fearless. She raised her shiny silver steel sword and continuously welcomed the heavy sword that was swinging at her. She poured all of her divine power into her elven device and repelled the violent yet rough slashes of the demon king amidst the crisp clangs of clashing sounds. Rather than saying that it was a beautiful clash of swords, it would be more accurate to say that one side was simply venting their violence, while the other side was doing their best to defend against the other side's attacks. In the eyes of some ordinary people and even in the eyes of ordinary elves, such a battle of one attacking and one defending was rather exciting. However, for Noah, who had once faced a god and even killed a god, it was a little too simple. This was because Noah could easily see that just like when he faced Hercules in the form of a servant, the Saintess was also waiting for an opportunity in the battle with the demon king. She was waiting for an opportunity to kill him in one strike. And this opportunity came very quickly. Roar! Perhaps it was because it was furious that it couldn't take down a weak girl for a long time. In order to slay the foolish girl who challenged it, the demon king raised its pitch-black knight's sword high up and gathered all of its strength into the next strike. However, this long accumulation of power finally laid a decisive foundation for the Saintess to defeat the demon king. Clang! Suddenly, the shining silver steel sword in the Saintess' hand suddenly shone with a dazzling light. Like a ray of moonlight flashing through space, it swept forward with a pleasant sword sound. At such a close distance, the demon king who was still accumulating power with his elven device raised high couldn't dodge at all. He could only watch as the moonlight slash landed on his body. Poochie! Without any obstruction, the sharp steel sword directly pierced through the demon king's chest, piercing through the heart of the male elven envoy who brought unimaginable disaster to the continent. Whing! The shining silver steel sword suddenly trembled and burst out with a shockingly strong light, completely enveloping the demon king's body in the light. Roar! In the end, the demon king only had time to let out a hair-raising roar. In the dazzling light, his body gradually disappeared. Clang! Then, the pitch-black knight's sword in the hands of the demon king of disaster fell down and stabbed into the ground upside down. At this moment, the demon king was eliminated. And the scene of the saintess who saved the world powerlessly sitting on the ground became the last scene in the legend of the saintess and the demon king that spread throughout the continent. Similarly, it also became the last scene in the eyes of Noah, who watched the entire process from the perspective of God. As his consciousness gradually returned to his mind, Noah woke up from his sleep and slowly opened his eyes. Because he didn't draw the curtains, when the sky began to brighten, the darkness in the pink room was gradually expelled. Noah, who was lying on the sofa with a quilt covering his body, didn't have a bright look in his eyes. Instead, he looked a little gloomy. After a while, he finally regained his senses. He straightened up and covered his forehead with his hand. His deep eyes flickered with slight ripples. Is it that dream again? The dream of the final battle between the saintess and the demon king. This time, Noah did not wake up because of the sudden dream. Not only did he clearly know that he was dreaming, but he also witnessed the final battle between the saintess and the demon king from the perspective of God, which no one could discover until the very last moment. Raising his hand and looking at the elven seal on the back of his hand, Noah extracted the divine aura from the divine aura source in his body bit by bit and poured it into the seal. Wang, with a slight tremor, the elven seal emitted a weak light. Cold Steel Queen, holy sword that slays demons and demons, become a sword of steel and bestow upon me divine power. The familiar contractual elven incantation sounded around him, causing the weak light to become even brighter. However, after a while, the bright light dimmed again until it completely disappeared and returned to its original state. Although he didn't have much hope, the failure of the summoning still made Noah smile helplessly. I've really made a contract with a troublesome elf. Just as he finished speaking, the sound of a door being opened echoed into Noah's ears. That was the sound of the door to Alice's room being opened. Good morning. Not knowing whether she was talking to herself or was subconsciously talking in her sleep, Alice's expression was hazy as she rubbed her eyes. She looked sleepy as she walked out of the room. Seeing this scene, Noah knew that Alice was probably still asleep. This was because Alice was wearing pajamas with polka dots printed on them. Her sky-blue waist-length hair wasn't tied into a ponytail, but was instead let loose. This made Alice, who was usually very stern, look even more gentle and beautiful at this moment. The cute pajamas, coupled with Alice's cute appearance, made Noah's expression relax as he replied subconsciously. Good morning. Hearing this voice, Alice's body froze. Then, as if she finally remembered something very important, Alice maintained her stiff body as her neck slowly turned towards Noah's direction. When she saw Noah, her face slowly turned red. Looking at Noah lying on the sofa, then looking at herself in her pajamas, Alice's eyes began to well up with tears. Wah wah wah. With a sorrowful cry, Alice scurried back to her room and slammed the door shut. The corner of Noah's mouth twitched. It was just pajamas, was there a need to have such a big reaction? 30 minutes later, Alice came out of the room in her uniform and light clothes, with a knight's sword at her waist. The moment she came out, Alice's face flushed red as she pulled out the knight's sword at her waist and pointed it at Noah. Speak. What did you see? Noah knew that inexplicable trouble had come again. Just as Noah was about to subdue Alice, a series of hurried footsteps could be heard clearly from outside, followed by a series of violent knocks on the door. The next moment, a panicked voice suddenly sounded. Captain. Something happened. Alice's expression changed. Chapter 958. Until just now, Alice's face was flushed red with shame and indignation. The moment the flustered voice sounded outside the door, not only did her expression change, but the flush on her face also faded away, replaced by an incomparably stern expression. At this moment, Alice switched from an ordinary girl to the leader of the Wind King Knights, who protected the security and order of the Elven Academy. Without any hesitation, Alice stepped forward and opened the door. Two girls appeared outside the door. The two girls were equipped with the same light armor and swords as Alice of the Wind King Knights. Obviously, these two girls were also members of the Wind King Knights. Leader. Looking at Alice, who opened the door, the two girls heaved a sigh of relief, but soon they spoke anxiously. Something happened. Leader. Calm down. Alice put her hands on the shoulders of the two girls, indicating for them to calm down. What happened? The two girls looked at each other and immediately seemed to have reached a consensus. They looked at Alice together and said this sentence in unison. In the elven forest, a large number of magical beasts suddenly rushed out and attacked the gate of the academy. You. What did you say? Alice cried out involuntarily. Magical beasts. Noah's heart moved, and he also stood up. Magical beasts. It was a species that was different from elves, but also lived in the elemental elf world. They didn't have the power to form a contract with humans, nor did they have the various abilities like elves. Strictly speaking, they should be a kind of wild beast. However, this kind of magical beast usually had a strange body structure and physical strength, much stronger than ordinary wild beasts. Many people said that magical beasts were a species born from the union of elves in the elemental elf world and wild beasts in the human world. However, this statement had never been confirmed. What was certain was that this kind of magical beast did indeed have physical strength and body structure that ordinary wild beasts didn't have. Rather than saying that it was the same kind of existence as tigers and lions, it was better to say that it was the same kind of existence as dinosaurs. Therefore, even if it didn't have the ability of elves, the threat of magical beasts to humans was much greater than ordinary wild beasts. Compared to some elves, it was not to be outdone. Like elves, magical beasts would also come to this world through the gate of the elemental elf world and live in the elven forest. Now, it seemed that a portion of the magical beasts living in the elven forest had suddenly attacked the academy. Alice, who knew that she could not afford to be careless, immediately spoke. Have all the knights gone over? Most of them are already there. The rest are still being notified, a young girl from the Knight Corps quickly said. Leader, should we ask the academy for help? In addition to the Wind King Knights, there were also teachers with strength comparable to the Empire's elven knights. If he asked them for help, it would probably make the situation much better, right? However, Alice shook her head. I don't know why, but the magical beasts suddenly began to attack the academy's gates. Who knows when other magical beasts will attack the academy from another direction? If we send all the academy's teachers to the gates, once other magical beasts break in, no one will be able to protect the academy's students and important secrets. Alice made a prompt decision. Send someone to report this matter to the dean and ask him to inform the teachers to be on guard against the magical beasts that might attack at any time. The magical beasts at the gates will be blocked by the Wind King Knights. In this way, even if we can't defend it, there are still teachers in the academy who can face the attack at any time. The two young girls from the Knight Corps hurriedly nodded, and one of them ran back. It seemed that she had gone to the dean's office. Let's hurry to the gates too. Alice called out to the remaining young girl from the Knight Corps, then turned around and looked at Noah with an extremely solemn expression. If you're willing to help, go to the academy and inform those students that if we can't defend the gates, you can let them take refuge. After leaving this sentence, Alice did not even wait for Noah's reply and directly ran out with the young girl from the Knight Corps. Noah, who silently watched Alice run away, narrowed his eyes slightly and also walked out of the door. Once out of the mole class's dormitory, Noah had yet to decide on a direction when a voice called out to him. You look quite leisurely. Noah's footsteps paused, and he turned around to look at the source of the voice. In the direction of the academy, Grey Vaz walked calmly in the direction of Noah's direction. I thought you definitely went to the gates. Hearing the words of the continent's strongest elf envoy, Noah smiled indifferently. In other words, the current situation is so urgent that you need to find me to help. No, it's just magical beasts. They don't have the ability to attack this academy that specializes in nurturing elf envoys and has teachers who are comparable to the Empire's elf knights stationed there. Grey Vaz cast her gaze in the direction of the gates. It's just that those girls from the Wind King Knights probably don't have the ability to block the attack of the magical beasts. Why would the magical beasts suddenly attack the academy? Noah asked the question that he was concerned about. Could it be that the academy often receives attacks from the magical beasts in the elf forest? Since it's a building built in the elf forest, it's not strange for it to receive attacks from magical beasts, Grey Vaz said with a calm expression. It's just that the magical beasts in the elf forest are generally from the elemental elf realm through the gate and accidentally enter this world. If there are no accidents, they won't form a group. The Wind King Knights can easily deal with a single magical beast. Noah understood the meaning behind Grey Vaz's words. Since the magical beasts in the elf forest usually acted alone, it could only be that someone was secretly manipulating them to suddenly attack in large numbers. I've already sent people to investigate who's behind this. Grey Vaz glanced at Noah. As for the magical beasts at the gates, I'll leave it to you to deal with. Grey Vaz's words left no room for doubt. It wasn't an order, nor was it a plea. It was like a teacher giving homework to a student. There was no reason for the student to not have to hand in the homework just because he said he didn't want to. Grey Vaz could be considered Noah's mentor in the field of elven envoys. Since Grey Vaz was giving homework to Noah, the content of the homework was obvious. Noah, who was keenly aware of Grey Vaz's intentions, frowned. Don't tell me you want me to use my contracted spirit to fight against a large number of magical beasts. With Noah's strength, it wasn't difficult to deal with a group of magical beasts. However, if he had to summon his contracted spirit to fight, it would be a different story. After all, Noah's contracted spirit couldn't be summoned at all. In response, Grey Vaz said indifferently. I've said it before. When you're in battle, your improvement speed is 1,000 times faster than normal. Grey Vaz looked at Noah meaningfully. Perhaps, only when you're in battle state will your amazing talent be displayed. After saying that, Grey Vaz turned around and walked away. Looking at Grey Vaz's back, Noah curled his lips. This hateful witch, when Noah arrived at the school square, what presented before him was chaos. Oh whoa! Magical beasts that were as big as giant dinosaurs and had all kinds of strange appearances were madly colliding with each other with their naturally huge bodies. The place where they collided was naturally the school gate. Dong 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 dong. With the fierce collisions of those magical beasts, heavy sounds vibrated in the air. However, the school gate wasn't attacked at all. Because a thin layer of light screen blocked the attacks of those magical beasts. Og! The elven envoys of the Wind King Knight Legion stretched out their hands toward the gate. Their hands were shining brightly, and their bodies were surging with the phosphorescence that represented divine power. They seemed to be supporting something bitterly and constantly transmitting divine power. Ha! Ha! At the head of the Wind King Knight Legion, Alice also stretched out a hand. Halos undulated in her hand, setting off waves of divine power fluctuations. She was also supporting bitterly. That thin layer of light screen was the enchantment created by the Wind King Knight Legion's elven magic. Noah looked outside the school gate and clenched his elven hand. Chapter 959. At the head of the Wind King Knights, Alice continuously instilled her divine power into her hands. Together with her companions, she used the enchantment created by elven magic to block the attacks of the magical beasts. But that was all. Due to the fact that they could only block the attacks of the magical beasts by putting all their manpower on defense, the Wind King Knights could no longer spare any manpower to attack the magical beasts. They could only passively endure the attacks of the magical beasts. If this continued, it would be impossible to defend against the attacks of the magical beasts when the divine power of all the elves present was exhausted. At the thought of this, Alice couldn't help but feel a little anxious. If this continued, it definitely wouldn't work. Someone had to stand up and repel the continuous attacks of the magical beasts. Otherwise, in a battle of attrition, the Wind King Knights would definitely be the first to fall. However, once too many people were drawn out to attack the magical beasts, the enchantment that was constructed would also weaken, causing it to be breached by the magical beasts. Alice had no way to back down now. However, Alice also understood that there was no time to continue hesitating. At that moment, Alice gritted her teeth and made a decision in her heart. "I'll leave this to you guys," Alice said loudly to the knights beside her. "I'll go crusade against the magical beasts." After saying that, Alice didn't give the knights any time to react. She immediately withdrew her divine power and dashed forward. "Leader." The elven envoys of the knights were shocked. The number of magical beasts attacking from the direction of the elf forest was about 20 to 30. With such a number of magical beasts, even the elven knights of the empire couldn't deal with them alone. Only the elven envoys at the level of the 12 knight generals had the ability to charge into such a group of magical beasts alone. Although Alice's results and strength in the Elven Academy were considered top-notch, and she wasn't inferior to those regular elven knights, she was still far from the level of the 12 knight generals. Going to crusade against so many magical beasts alone was definitely a dead end. It was impossible that Alice didn't know how dangerous this was. However, other than Alice, who was the leader of the Wind King Knights, who else was suitable to stand up at this time? Clang! Alice unsheathed the knight's sword at her waist and charged towards the gate of the academy. She arrived at a place that was only separated from the magical beasts by a thin barrier of light. In the next moment, a surge of divine power surged from Alice's body, gradually turning into a whirlwind that swept into the air. A black figure slowly appeared in the middle of the whirlwind that had swept up into the air. "Come!" Alice raised one hand above her head, and her stern voice resounded throughout the entire space. "Magic Wind Elf, Smolf." As soon as the voice fell, the black shadow in the center of the whirlwind shook and a pair of wings suddenly spread out. Bang! Immediately, the whirlwind surrounding the black shadow was blown away, exposing the full appearance of the black shadow to the sunlight. It was an eagle. It was a very majestic eagle with turquoise body hair. That was Alice's contracted sprite. Magic Wind Elf, Smolf. A genuine high elf. Screech! With a sharp and resounding eagle cry, the magic wind elf named Smolf shot down from the sky. Against the gale, it gradually turned into an afterimage. Its speed was astonishingly fast. Brutal wind. As if their minds were connected, Alice raised one hand high and closed her eyes. The divine power all over her body converged on that raised hand, and she chanted an elven incantation like a ballad. "Bestow the magic spear that pierced through the heart of my archenemy to my hand." The magic wind elf that turned into an afterimage descended from the sky and turned into a whirlwind that suddenly landed on Alice's hand. Hum! A series of trembling sounds rang out from the ground. Whoosh! Gusts of gale swept in all directions. Alice only tightly grasped the whirlwind that landed on her hand, and with a spin, she faced the numerous magical beasts in front of her. And in Alice's hand, there was an extra spear. A spear that looked like it was used for rituals and ceremonies. Ha! Suddenly, Alice shouted and swung the ceremonial spear in her hand forward. Dong! A gust of gale suddenly appeared without any warning and turned into the most powerful wind wave. As if it could topple mountains and overturn seas, it surged forward violently. Bang! The magical beasts that were fiercely charging towards the gate of Elven Academy didn't have time to adjust their posture. Their bodies were directly penetrated through the barrier and hit by the gale that surged from the inside of the academy. As if they were hit by an invisible shockwave, they were all sent flying. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Alice dodged and leaped high into the air. She crossed the thin barrier and swept out of the gate. Wind! Overturn my enemy. Alice, who leaped into the air, chanted an elven magic incantation in an extremely hurried tone and swung the ceremonial spear down heavily. Wind King explosive array. Still, there wasn't even the slightest sign. The astonishing gale turned into a wave of impact. Like a tornado descending from the sky, it was like a huge drill that fell to the ground. Against the whistling sound of the wind, it landed on the ground. Bang! The ground that was directly hit by the storm, with the tornado as the center, exploded in all directions, rolling up the sand and dust in the sky, and bouncing the demonic beasts away again. This attack sent all the magical beasts that were attacking the gate of Elven Academy flying. At the same time, it also angered the magical beasts that had fallen to the ground. Roar! With a loud beast roar, a magical beast that looked like a snake suddenly shook from the ground and turned into the most direct attack. Its huge body shot towards Alice in the air. Alice was shocked and hurriedly raised the ceremonial spear in her hand to block in front of her body. But the huge body of the snake-like beast wasn't something that a small spear could block. Bang! With a dull thud, Alice let out a pained grunt as she was sent flying. Resisting the huge impact and pain from her body, Alice squeezed out a sound. Gale, blow. A slight gust of wind blew around Alice's body, but it was just enough to cause Alice's body to slowly come to a stop and float in the air. Swish! But at the same time, a huge tail suddenly lashed out from Alice's side. It cut through the air at an astonishing speed and landed heavily on Alice's body. Bang! With another muffled sound, a black shadow shot down from the air and smashed onto the ground, stirring up thick smoke and dust. Commander! Inside the academy, the Wind King Knights saw this scene with their own eyes and let out sorrowful cries. However, only Alice knew the truth. That blow didn't cause any harm to her at all. Because, at the critical moment, a figure suddenly appeared by Alice's side and pulled her into his arms. Then, he threw out an extremely powerful punch to meet the enormous tail that seemed to cover the sky and cover the sun. As a result, the person who took Alice into his arms shot down from the air due to the force of the collision. As for the huge tail, it was also blasted away. The owner of the huge tail was that snake-like magical beast just now. The gigantic magical beast that had been blasted away drew a perfect parabola in midair, and then fell into the large group of magical beasts in front of it, and was drowned by the rest of the magical beasts. Only then did Alice open her eyes. What was imprinted in Alice's eyes was a face. A face that she hadn't seen many times but was rather familiar with. You! Alice was stunned. The man who took Alice into his arms glanced at the magical beasts that were roaring at him, and a glint flashed across his dark and deep eyes. Leave the rest to me. With that, Noah put Alice down from his arms, and before Alice could react, he took steady steps and walked forward step by step. A burst of berserk divine might rose from the figure that was neither tall nor big, but it was abnormally tall and straight. Chapter 960. Roar, 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 roar. At this moment, the roars of numerous magical beasts resounded through the sky, echoing throughout the entire Alicia Elven Academy. Rumble. Without any hesitation, the magical beasts that were blown away by Alice's storm once again gathered in groups. Like a violent wave, their heavy footsteps repeatedly stomped on the ground, and as the ground shook, they surged in Noah's direction. If they were to be drowned by the horde of beasts, it was likely that anyone would end up being trampled to death. However, Noah's expression did not change at all as he looked at the rather shocking group of magical beasts swarming towards him. Noah had already faced this scene countless times. In the world of the Dark Bullet, Noah had faced thousands of protozoan virus legions. In the world of the God Slayer, Noah had faced thousands of wolves released by Marquis Warban. In the world of looking for a chance encounter in a dungeon, Noah had also faced monsters that could be said to be an army of thousands of men and horses. Compared to those magical beasts, there were only 20 or 30 of them, and they were only able to create such a shocking scene because of their large size. They were not intimidating at all. As though he didn't see the horde of magical beasts charging towards him, Noah raised his hand and faced the front. Gazing at the complicated elven seal, Noah spoke softly as if he was talking to himself. I don't know what happened to you, and I don't know what your current situation is, but in the dream, I can feel that fearless emotion and extraordinary power you had when you fought the Demon King with your previous master. So, I believe that you must know about me, just like me. Noah's voice was strong and powerful as he said this. It doesn't matter if you're the legendary holy sword that killed the Demon King, or just an unknown elf. If you really know about me, then answer me. Because I need you. As soon as he finished speaking, Noah clenched his outstretched hand into a fist. The endless divine power that surged around him gushed toward the elven mark like a flood that was released from a dam. Cold Steel Queen, the holy sword that slays demons, become a sword of steel, and bestow me with divine power. The elven language that represented the contract turned into a song that reverberated in the air. Clang! On the back of Noah's hand, the intricate elven seal bloomed with extremely bright light, illuminating the surroundings. Thus, the circuit to the elemental elven world was successfully established. In the past, Noah's summoning would always end in failure because he could not get a response from the elven contract in the elven world. However, this time, Noah clearly felt it. A faintly discernible presence appeared silently from the end of the circuit that connected the elven seal to the elemental realm and responded to Noah's call. Wang! At this moment, the elven seal in Noah's hand burst out with lightning. In that lightning, dense light particles slowly gathered together, and gradually condensed into form in Noah's hand. Immediately afterward, it was as if something had broken free from within, and the condensed light particles suddenly exploded. Bang! After a sound like glass breaking, the light particles that gathered in Noah's hand dissipated. However, a cold object appeared in Noah's hand and fell into his palm. Sword. It was a steel sword that was silver in color, inlaid with gold threads and crystals, and flowed with a layer of sacred silver light. On the blade of the steel sword, there were words inscribed in the ancient elven language, Terminus Estate, Protector of the World. Roar, 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 roar. The violent and chaotic roars of magical beasts rubbed against the air, causing the dangerous atmosphere to once again fill the entire space. Noah just raised his head and looked at the group of magical beasts charging at the forefront. A trace of coldness flashed across his deep eyes. Clang! A sword light that seemed to shake the world suddenly appeared in the space. It crossed the space at an amazing speed and directly swept toward the group of magical beasts charging at the forefront. Poochie! The group of magical beasts charging at the forefront was directly swept by the bright sword light. Accompanied by a clear tearing sound, their huge bodies were cut in half. Boom! The body of the magical beast that was cut in half fell heavily to the ground, causing a heavy sound and sand to fill the sky. The group of magical beasts charging with their companions at the forefront without any precaution were pulled down by the corpses that fell to the ground one after another. In a series of muffled landing sounds, they smashed to the ground one by one. This scene shocked all the elven envoys of the Wind King Knights led by Alice, and they stood rooted to the ground in shock. Even Noah looked at the steel sword in his hand in surprise. At this time, the steel sword shining with silver light was flowing with a layer of holy light under the situation where Noah poured a lot of divine power into it. Holding the holy sword that killed the Demon King tightly, Noah could even clearly feel that the sword in his hand had a very clear pulse, as if it had a life of its own. It was tightly integrated with Noah's divine power. Under such circumstances, the divine power that Noah poured into the holy sword all turned into its power. Although he didn't know what kind of ability this holy sword had, it was impossible for ordinary elves to have the power to kill more than half of the magical beasts with just one blow. Because the person who wielded the sword was Noah, only then did Noah know what kind of power the steel sword in his hand had. To put it bluntly, as long as there was enough divine power, Noah even had the confidence to split a mountain peak with the holy sword in his hand. Is this your power? Noah slowly closed his eyes, feeling the pulse and power of the holy sword in his hand, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. That's not all, right? Show me what you've got. The steel sword shining with silver light shook, as if responding to Noah's voice, and the holy light on it became more and more dazzling. Roar, 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 roar. At this time, those huge magical beasts stood up from the ground and rushed in from all directions toward Noah's direction. Whoosh! Noah maintained the state of closing his eyes, but with a step, his speed suddenly soared and flashed across the ground. The next second, the silver holy sword swept across the space and slashed at a magical beast beside him. Poochie! With the flash of the sword light, the huge magical beast's body was cut into two. In the academy, the members of the Wind King Knights could only see a sword light flashing back and forth among the magical beasts, repeatedly sweeping across the space. Poochie, poochie, poochie. Every time that sword light flashed in the space and swept across the magical beasts' bodies, the huge magical beasts would be cut into two at the waist. And the elf user who was waving the steel sword shining with silver light among the magical beasts kept his eyes closed, and his figure flashed back and forth nimbly. That scene was simply like an intoxicating dance. With Alice as the leader, all the members of the Wind King Knights were intoxicated by it. It didn't matter whether it was a male elf user. At this moment, Alice and the others were just admiring an intoxicating sword dance, and their hearts were brimming with emotions called touching. Unfortunately, that intoxicating sword dance appeared in a hurry and disappeared in an extremely hurry as well. When Alice and the others reacted, the world that was filled with the roars of the magical beasts and the tremors of the ground had unknowingly returned to silence. Those magical beasts that made the Wind King Knights badly battered all ended up dying without an intact corpse. The bodies that were cut in half at the waist were mixed together, and their original appearances couldn't be seen. Only the figure holding the steel sword shining with silver light was left standing in the middle of the magical beasts that had fallen to the ground. Under the rendering of the light of the holy sword, his figure was exceptionally sacred. Noah, who was immersed in his own world, opened his eyes and cast his gaze back to the silver holy sword in his hand. Looking at the sword inscription engraved on the holy sword, Noah opened his mouth slightly. World Protection Deity. Aster, the light circulating on the holy sword brightened slightly. It looked like it was responding to Noah's voice. Chapter 961. Alicia Elven Academy. In the dean's office, Gray and Vath were listening to Noah's report on the magical beast horde attacking the academy gate. Gray and Vath didn't think that Noah could repel the magical beast horde by himself. As mentioned before, if there were any elven users who could repel 20 to 30 magical beasts by themselves, it would only be the top elven users like the 12 Knights. Gray and Vath were not only the leader of the 12 Knights, but they were also known as the strongest elven user in the continent. To Gray and Vath, repelling a magical beast horde of that level wasn't a problem, let alone Noah, who was stronger than Gray and Vath. What Gray and Vath really cared about was Noah's progress as an elven user. Therefore, when she heard that Noah had summoned a contracted elf and turned it into the most suitable elven device for himself, the strongest elven user in the continent with the title of a Twilight, which showed a satisfied expression. Apart from that, she also sighed. You can turn a contracted elf into the most suitable elven device for yourself after summoning it for the first time. Gray and Vath looked at Noah and said with a faint smile. Sure enough, your improvement is the fastest when you're in battle mode. Hearing that, Noah curled his lips, but he also understood why Gray and Vath sighed like that. Although elven users could communicate with elves and exchange contracts to obtain the elves' power, it wasn't something that could be obtained effortlessly after contracting. Even after contracting elves, they still needed to study hard, practice, and practice to obtain power. For example, elven magic. As long as an elven user contracted an elf, they could use magic of the same attribute as the contracted elf. But being able to use and using were two completely different things. Only after going through rigorous elven magic training could an elven user use elven magic. The power that could be obtained after forming a contract with an elf was the same. Summoning elves required practice. Using elves required practice. Using elves' power required practice. In order to transform the elves into the most suitable elven magic device, one needed to cultivate as well. Let's just say that it happened in Alicia Elven Academy. Although Claire and Alice were able to use the elven equipment so easily, they thought that it was easy. In fact, in the entire Alicia Elven Academy, less than half of the students were able to use elven devices. Most of the senior students were able to use the elven device. However, in the lower grades, apart from Claire, Linley, and Alice, who were exceptionally talented in using elves and had contracts with high elves, less than 30% of the students in the lower grades had truly mastered the elven devices. However, in a battle situation, Noah, the god slayer, would naturally grasp the method of battle. After summoning the contract spirit, as part of the instinct of the god slayer, Noah understood what was the most suitable fighting style for him at that time. Therefore, in that instant, Noah naturally grasped the method to transform the elves into the most suitable elven device for him. All of this was due to the god slayer's unparalleled talent in battle. Or rather, it could be said that it was his instinct in essence. Of course, Noah's amazing talent was also one of the reasons. If that's the case, there won't be a problem. Grey Vath heaved a sigh of relief, her expression more or less becoming dreamy. My goal can be achieved. After hearing Grey Vath's words, Noah remembered. Grey Vath had invited him to study in Alicia Elven Academy for a purpose. As for what that purpose was, Grey Vath had never mentioned it. No, it shouldn't be said that she didn't say it, but Grey Vath felt that it wasn't the right time to say it yet. Grey Vath had always been waiting for Noah's power in using elves to blossom. Now, Noah was finally able to use the elven device. Being able to use the elven device was an important step for an elven user to take charge of things. In other words, as an elven user, even if Noah wasn't outstanding, he could still be considered to have passed the test. Can you say it now? Noah asked. You were so kind to help me solve the problem of my identity, and even gave me guidance in using elves. What is it for? Grey Vath was silent. Grey Vath picked up the coffee on the table and took a sip. After a while, she said this. I want you to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Ceremony. Elven Sword Dance Ceremony. Noah frowned. Elven Sword Dance Ceremony. The ceremony to present the sword dance ceremony to the Elven King. Grey Vath did so much for Noah just to let Noah participate in this ceremony. However, if this was really the case, then the question that Grey Vath asked about Noah's age when they first met would be answered. The power of an elven user would continuously decline after reaching its peak. The peak period of power development would be between the ages of 10 to 25. Therefore, the elves loved the things that young and pure elves offered the most. Therefore, the Elven Sword Dance Ceremony had a rule that only elves under the age of 20 could participate. This rule didn't only apply to the Elven Sword Dance Ceremony, but also to any important event where elves were sacrificed. Noah wasn't yet 20 years old, so he just happened to meet this rule. In 2 months, the Elven Sword Dance Ceremony will be held in the elemental elf world, Grey Vath said to Noah. I hope you can participate in the Elven Sword Dance Ceremony in 2 months and win. Why? Noah's frown deepened, and he asked directly. Why do you want me to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Ceremony? Grey Vath was still silently sipping her coffee. After a while, she replied. Not only can the winner of the Elven Sword Dance ceremony fulfill a wish, but the country of the winner will also be protected by the Elven King, leading to the prosperity of the country. I hope you can represent the Ordesia Empire to participate in the Elven Sword Dance ceremony. Isn't this reason enough? Noah didn't answer. He only looked straight at Grey Vath. Noah's intuition told him that this reason was very likely one of the reasons why Grey Vath wanted him to participate in the Elven Sword Dance ceremony. There was also a very important reason that Grey Vath didn't say. Grey Vath didn't tell the truth, but she also didn't tell a lie. It was just that Grey Vath hid a part of it. Was it because it would be bad if Noah found out? Or was it because of other reasons? Noah didn't know. However, Noah saw an emotion in Grey Vath's eyes that didn't avoid him. Uneasiness. Obviously, at the Elven Sword Dance ceremony in 2 months, something that Grey Vath definitely didn't want to happen would happen. Therefore, Grey Vath wanted Noah to win in the Elven Sword Dance ceremony to eliminate her uneasiness. As an Elven user, your ability can only be considered passable, but your strength is quite amazing. Grey Vath looked straight at Noah. If it's you, you will definitely win. That's why I let you stay. This time, it was Noah's turn to be silent. Frankly speaking, just like during the Holy Grail War, Noah didn't think that winning in the Elven Sword Dance ceremony would fulfill any of his wishes. Noah really didn't have any thoughts about the Elven Sword Dance ceremony. And that meant that Noah didn't have a reason to participate. Similarly, there was also no reason not to participate. I understand. Noah sighed. I will participate in the Elven Sword Dance ceremony in 2 months. Hearing this, Grey Vath smiled. If it was said that Grey Vath was relieved after knowing that Noah used the Elven device, then now, Grey Vath really felt a little relieved. As for whether Noah could win, Grey Vath felt that even if it wasn't 100%, it would still be more than 70% to 80%. The remaining part was because of the Elven Sword Dance ceremony itself. This time, the Elven Sword Dance ceremony is a team competition, Grey Vath said. You still have to find your own teammates. Noah suddenly felt troubled. Teammates? In this academy, could he find teammates? Chapter 962. After walking out of the dean's office, Noah was deeply troubled as he walked outside. As the largest sacrificial ceremony to the 5 Elven Kings, the rules and methods of the Elven Sword Dance Festival depended on the mood of the Elven Kings. It was different every time. For example, the Elven Sword Dance Festival 15 years ago was an unrestricted battle where many people fought at the same time. The Elven Sword Dance Festival 3 years ago was an individual battle. It was a one-on-one elimination match. As long as one defeated the opponent in front of them, they would be able to win until the end. This time, the Elven Sword Dance Festival would be held as a team competition. Every team had to gather 5 Elven users to participate in the competition. Of course, it wasn't just gathering 5 Elven users to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. At the very least, the Elven users who represented the various kingdoms on this continent had to go through a special selection process. The Alesia Elven Academy, as the academy specially used to nurture Elven users in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, received 3 spots to participate. In other words, only 3 teams in the Alesia Elven Academy could participate in this Elven Sword Dance Festival. For this reason, the Alesia Elven Academy would rank the students in the academy. In the period before the Elven Sword Dance Festival, the students were allowed to form their own teams and compete for ranking points using various methods decided by the academy. For example, if the students could win the team battle arranged by the academy, they would be able to obtain the corresponding ranking points. Another example was that the students could complete various missions that only Elven users could complete. According to the level of the mission, they would also be able to obtain the corresponding ranking points. Finally, the top 3 teams on the ranking would obtain the right to represent the Alesia Elven Academy and the Alesia Elven Academy to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. They would then head to the Elemental Elf realm and compete with the best Elven users from all over the world. The problem was with the teams. Let's not talk about the fact that I've only been in this academy for less than half a month. Just look at those pure witches here. Who would want to team up with me? Noah sighed loudly. Grave Oz, that witch, really gave me a huge problem. Fortunately, Noah wasn't asked to form a team right away. Due to time, tacit understanding, compatibility, and other issues, the academy didn't have any special requirements. Only teams that had gathered 5 Elven users could participate in the ranking. Even though he was alone, Noah was still able to participate in the group matches arranged by the academy and receive various missions from the academy. As long as he won the team competition and completed the mission of the corresponding level, even if Noah was alone, he would still be able to obtain ranking points and rise to the top of the rankings. However, if they didn't manage to gather enough members before the start of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, they would be disqualified even if they were in the top 3. It's useless to worry about this problem now. Noah patted his cheeks. We can only let nature take its course. With this thought in mind, Noah walked towards the dormitory of the mole class where he currently lived. At this moment, Noah's footsteps suddenly stopped, and his eyes slowly narrowed. Retracting his foot, Noah slowly turned around and looked behind him. Hee, almost at the same time that Noah turned around, an extremely pleasant laughter resounded in the air. Your senses are indeed very sharp. Just a glance at you would attract your attention. Appearing in front of you like this, it seems that it's impossible not to be noticed. The one who said this sentence with an extremely pleasant voice was a young girl. A young girl who sat on a tree branch at the side, looking down at Noah condescendingly. Noah raised his head and met the other's gaze, looking at the tree. She was wearing a dull, dark-colored gown. Beautiful black hair that reached her waist hung down behind her back. There was a bow on one side of her hair. Her skin was the kind that was the fairest, as smooth as a pearl. As for her appearance, it was as if she had walked out of a painting, perfect to the point of being impeccable. Such a young girl was sitting on a tree nearby, constantly sizing up Noah with an undisguised gaze, and making a melodious voice that sounded like the tinkling of a bell. You are more capable than I thought. I spent an entire night searching for a group of magical beasts, but you actually easily dealt with them. Noah slightly narrowed his eyes. As expected, the group of magical beasts attacking Alesia Elven Academy was controlled by someone behind the scenes. And that person, at this very moment, appeared in front of Noah, without the slightest intention of hiding. Noah wasn't interested in the young girl's motive for doing this. Thus, Noah asked the question that he was most concerned about. Who are you? Noah directly looked at the young girl who was as dark as the moonlight, his eyes fluctuating with some waves of surprise. You're not human. When this sentence came out, even the young girl was stunned for a moment, but then she smiled even more happily and said with a smile. That's right, I'm not human. I'm an elf, the highest dark elf. Elf. Noah couldn't help but take another look at the young girl. The highest elf. Existing in the form of a human, possessing powerful strength that even high elves couldn't reach. In the world of elemental elves, in terms of rank, other than the 5 elven kings, they were the highest elves. Noah had indeed read about this in a book. However, Noah really didn't expect that he would actually meet a humanoid elf of the highest rank. To elven users, elves weren't just companions who exchanged contracts, they were also a guarantee of strength. Without a contract, elven users wouldn't be so powerful that ordinary humans couldn't reach them. If others were to know that there was an elf of the highest rank here, it would definitely cause a huge commotion, right? And if this dark elf who appeared in the form of a human didn't have a master, then it wouldn't be as simple as causing a commotion, it would definitely cause the envy of all elven users. Under such circumstances, the young girl who called herself the highest dark elf suddenly jumped down from the tree. As if her body was weightless, she lightly landed in front of Noah. The distance was close enough to make one think of an intimate lover. With her hands behind her back, the highest dark elf bent down and looked up at Noah with her beautiful eyes. On her charming face hung a beautiful smile that would make one's heart drunk. In history, other than the Demon King, there hasn't been a second male elf user. Your existence really makes me feel very concerned. The dark elf girl reached out a hand and gently caressed Noah's cheek. Her eyes were also swaying, looking very delicate and pitiful. If it wasn't for me, I believe that those who know would think that you're the Demon King's successor, right? Hearing the dark elf girl's words, Noah only allowed the dark elf girl to caress his cheek. His eyes met the dark elf girl's swaying eyes without any ripples as he asked this question. What do you mean by that? Very simple. The dark elf girl smiled mischievously. I just want to say that if you were the Demon King, then there's no way I wouldn't know. So, I can be sure that you're definitely not the Demon King. As she said this, the smile on the dark elf girl's face grew wider and wider. She even looked at Noah with eyes full of curiosity, as if she wanted to strip him naked and study him thoroughly. But, why would you be the elf user if you're not the Demon King's successor? And why would the fate of the person who was supposed to be the Demon King be changed because of you? How can I not be curious? Each sentence that made Noah feel inconceivable made Noah a little unhappy. What are you talking about? The dark elf girl didn't say anything. She just kept looking at Noah, as if she wanted to remember Noah's appearance forever. Also, as if she was deliberately teasing Noah, she moved away from Noah and turned in a circle in front of Noah. That scene was beautiful to the extreme. You'll find out sooner or later. A pair of pitch-black wings suddenly spread out from the dark elf girl's back. She flew into the air and smiled sweetly. My name is Lustia, don't forget. After saying this, the girl turned into a pitch-black feather and disappeared in midair. Noah quietly looked in the direction the girl disappeared. Lustia. Chapter 963. In the dormitory of the mole class, in a room with a pink atmosphere, Alice was taking off the equipment and swords of the Wind King Knights. After casually placing them on the table, she sat on the sofa and hugged a cute doll, resting her head on it. In the past, after finishing the work of the Wind King Knights and returning to her dormitory, Alice would usually start training in culinary skills. This was because Alice was a very serious person. Although there were some old-fashioned parts due to being too serious, it was also because of this that Alice would honestly accept her immaturity. It could be said that her heart was very upright. This was also the reason why she would train in culinary skills. Alice's dream was to become an outstanding knight. However, while being a knight, Alice also clearly remembered that she was still a young girl. In this aspect, Artoria was different from Artoria, who had given up on being a young girl in order to become an excellent knight and a perfect ruler. Therefore, Alice felt that while she was constantly advancing as a knight, for the sake of her future partner, she had to advance as a young girl as well. Therefore, in her free time, Alice would train her culinary skills for her future husband. Today, Alice did not immediately start training in culinary skills, which was rare. In Alice's mind, she kept replaying the scene that had happened today. The scene of her being rescued by a man from the ferocious magical beast and lying obediently in his arms. Moreover, it was in the form of a Princess Carrie. Thinking of that scene, Alice's pretty face turned completely red, and her heartbeat quickened slightly. The only ones who could communicate with the fairies were the pure and innocent girls. In order to maintain the purity of their bodies and minds, as elven messengers, the witches were almost completely isolated from the male environment since young. They received all kinds of elite education as elven messengers and became super greenhouse flowers who were not used to contact the opposite sex. It was precisely because of this that Noah, a male elven envoy, had suddenly barged into an academy that only had pure and innocent girls. That was why he had caused such a huge commotion, and even caused the pure witches to be subconsciously fearful and curious. However, being pure also meant that they were easy to deceive. Only a little overly ambiguous contact would cause these young girls' hearts to sprout and their hearts to beat incessantly. Now, Alice was undoubtedly in this state. So, he is so strong. While recalling the scene of her being rescued by Noah from the magical beasts, Alice could not help but think of Noah's leisurely and pleasing sword dance among the magical beasts. His sword dance somehow feels a little different from ours. The so-called sword dance originally referred to those battle techniques that were used to please the elves and were extremely pleasing to the eye. In order to unleash the full power of the elves, the elven messengers' battle techniques had to be closer to the sword dance. Otherwise, it was very likely that the contracted elves would not be able to unleash 100% of their power, or even be unable to control the contracted elves. For this reason, every elven user had to work hard on their battle techniques, so that their battle techniques would possess true battle prowess. At the same time, they also needed to have a ritual effect that could unleash the full power of the elven user. Alice, 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 and Alice, 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 and Alice, 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 and Alice, Alice. Take Alice for example. If she had to divide her sword dance into a ratio, then the ratio of practicality to aesthetics was 50/50. This was also the ratio of ordinary elven messengers' sword dances. However, Noah's sword dance gave Alice the feeling that it was 100% practical, and even the aesthetics were 100% perfect. Alice had only seen such a perfect sword dance from one person before. Lena Subble. 3 years ago, she had become the champion of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, using her beautiful sword dance to conquer the hearts of almost all elven messengers and obtain the title of the strongest sword dancer. At that time, Alice was still young, but she had watched the Elven Sword Dance Festival, and had also watched the sword dance of the strongest sword dancer. Thus, Alice had also been captivated by the sword dance of the strongest sword dancer. Noah's sword dance was completely different from Lena Subble's. If one were to say that Lena Subble's sword dance was beautiful, then Noah's sword dance was elegant and free. However, the sword dance of these two people had a kind of perfection. It was 100% practical and aesthetically pleasing, and there was no feeling of one aspect falling behind the other. That was the true sword dance. Alice thought so in her heart. At this moment, a voice sounded by Alice's ear. "What are you doing?" The sudden voice caused Alice, who was immersed in the memories of the morning, to shiver. Her hand almost subconsciously grasped the hilt of the knight's sword beside the sofa, and she fiercely pulled it out, bringing with it a sharp gust of wind as she swung it towards the source of the voice. Clink! At the same time, a hand suddenly appeared by the side of the knight's sword. With a crisp sound, the thumb and index finger pinched the sharp blade of the knight's sword, stopping the sword in its tracks. Only then did Alice react, and see the full appearance of the owner of the voice clearly. Impressively, it was the person that Alice had been blushing and her heart was beating fast. Hee. Tightly pinching the sharp blade of the knight's sword, Noah looked at Alice and smiled insincerely. "Your way of greeting is still so special, Captain Knight." Being looked at by Noah with such a fake smile, Alice's pretty face turned red with a bang, and she stuttered. "You? Why are you here? Why am I here?" Noah said helplessly. "I say, Captain Knight, you can't have forgotten that I was invited here by you, and that I'm temporarily staying with you, right?" Noah was right. Alice had indeed forgotten. Stay. Stay with me." Alice's face looked like it was boiling, and even steam was starting to come out. "Stay with me. Stay with me." At this moment, Alice was in a complete mess. Thinking about how Noah had saved her from the hands of the magical beast in the morning, and how he had hugged her tightly, and then thinking about the fact that she was staying with Noah, Alice's heart felt like it was about to explode, beating violently. In such a situation, Alice could only yell at Noah with a flushed face. We're not staying with you. I'm sleeping in my own room. You're only sleeping on the sofa here. I didn't say we were sleeping together. The corner of Noah's mouth twitched, and he said strangely. Why are you having such a big reaction? It's none of your business. Alice hurriedly put away the knight's sword that Noah was holding tightly, and hurriedly picked up the equipment on the sofa. I'm going back to my room. After saying this, Alice rushed into her room as if she was escaping, and with a loud bang, she shut the door tightly. Seeing this scene, Noah was speechless for a long time. What's going on? On the other side, Alice, who had shut the door tightly, leaned against the door, and clutched her chest, feeling her intense heartbeat. Her face was filled with embarrassment and confusion. Why? Why do I feel this way? Undoubtedly, I didn't feel this way yesterday. There must be a mistake somewhere. Alice could only plunge into her bed, hugging her pillow, and squeezing out a moaning sound. The night passed by as Noah was at a loss and Alice's blushing heart was beating fast. The next day, Noah's first feeling when he woke up in a daze was confusion. This time, I didn't have the dream of the saintess fighting the demon king. With this doubt, Noah's mind gradually regained clarity. However, as Noah's mind gradually cleared up, he found something strange. For some reason, in Noah's arms, there seemed to be something round, soft, and smooth, very warm and comfortable. If he had to make a comparison, it was like the most advanced pillow. Noah had hugged similar things before. For example, Mila. For example, Lisanna. For example, Julie and Lilith. And for example, Kitten and Hastia, who often burrowed into Noah's bed. What's going on? Chapter 964. The extremely comfortable touch from his arms made Noah's somewhat fuzzy consciousness disappear in an instant, and he was completely awake. Without any hesitation, Noah suddenly tightened the quilt covering his body and pulled it open. With the sound of the quilt being pulled open, the scene that originally existed under the quilt was displayed in front of Noah. However, looking at the scene under the quilt, Noah's face was completely stiff. With a soft sound, something like the highest grade of pillow slowly straightened up from Noah's arms, and a silver-white color filled Noah's entire eyes in an instant. It was the color of waist-length hair that looked extremely elegant, like a waterfall hanging down to her waist. As if swaying, the extremely beautiful silver-white long hair gently floated in front of Noah's eyes, and then drooped down with gravity. It swayed in a circle of beautiful arcs and draped over a layer of skin. A layer of skin that was as white as pearls and as smooth as jade. Finally, it gave people a feeling that it was as smooth and beautiful as ivory. And with such waist-length silver-white hair and ivory-like smooth and beautiful skin, the petite girl sat up from Noah's arms and entered Noah's eyes instead of the silver-white hair and ivory-like skin. At this moment, Noah only felt that time had stopped, and even his breathing had stopped for a moment. It wasn't just because of the sudden appearance of such a petite and cute girl in his arms. It was also because the girl's slightly raised little face was so delicate that even Noah, who had seen many beautiful girls, couldn't help but feel suffocated. This was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that this beautiful and petite girl who sat up from Noah's arms was naked. No. She wasn't completely naked. On the girl's pair of equally beautiful ivory-like thighs, she was actually wearing a pair of black over-the-knee socks. But in the case of almost naked, this pair of over-the-knee socks did not play any role in covering it all. Instead, it added an indescribable charm. Undoubtedly, it was such a petite girl wearing over-the-knee socks sitting in his arms, but Noah did not have any blasphemous thoughts. At this time, there was only a sense of beauty and inviolable holiness in Noah's heart, as if a fairy appeared in front of him. As a result, Noah could only look at the beautiful girl sitting in his arms with a stiff face, unable to speak for a long time. It was not as if Noah had not encountered the same situation before. After all, in the world of absolute dual blades, Julie and Lilith slept in Noah's arms more than once, making Noah usher in a wonderful morning. Therefore, Noah thought that he had long been used to the same scene. Until now, Noah knew that the so-called habit was just because the really impactful things had not appeared in front of him yet. Even if he was used to beautiful things, when he saw new beautiful things, humans would involuntarily be moved from the bottom of their hearts. However, in addition to being moved, Noah was also shocked by the impact of the sudden things in front of him. In such a situation, Noah didn't know how to react at all. For a while, he could only stiffen his face and fall into a state where he couldn't react. Unfortunately, time didn't really stand still. When Noah fell into a state where he couldn't react, the petite girl who sat up from Noah's arms, only wearing over-the-knee socks on her thighs, tilted her head, swaying with an inexplicable expression. A pair of pitiful eyes stared at Noah and spat out such a sentence without ripples. "Have you woken up?" The girl's voice wasn't the kind of clear and crisp water droplets that matched her appearance, but carried a somewhat steady bass. This voice couldn't be said to be not cute, but it didn't contain any emotions or fluctuations in it, making people feel cold. It was this cold and indifferent voice that caused Noah to shudder and come to his senses. "You." Noah's first reaction was to sit up. However, because the beautiful girl with silvery white waist-length hair was sitting on Noah's waist, when Noah sat up, the distance between his face and the extremely beautiful and tender face was infinitely close. Looking at the delicate face that suddenly enlarged in front of him, Noah's heart was shocked. He quickly raised his head and opened up a distance, his heart beating slightly faster. Noah had to admit, he hadn't been so embarrassed for a long time. What made Noah even more embarrassed was that seeing Noah raise his head and open up a distance, the beautiful and delicate girl, like a doll, actually moved her head closer and slightly raised her eyes, letting a pair of flickering eyes meet with Noah's eyes. "What's wrong with you? Are you not feeling well?" "No. No." Noah's voice became a little strange. "I'm not feeling unwell, I'm very comfortable." As soon as this sentence came out, Noah fiercely slapped himself, making a very clear and loud sound. This slap made Noah calm down a little, but also made the beautiful girl show a puzzled expression and asked innocently, "Why did you hit yourself?" "Master. I just wanted to calm myself down a little." Noah smiled embarrassedly, then immediately reacted and said in surprise, "Master." "Yes." The beautiful girl with silvery white hair nodded and said as if it was a matter of course, "You are my master. I'm your master." Noah hadn't completely understood the meaning of this sentence, and then, on the back of his left hand, a sharp tingling sensation was transmitted to his nerves. That sharp tingling sensation came from Noah's elf mark. Feeling this sharp tingling sensation, Noah finally understood. "You." Noah looked at the girl in a daze. "You're not my contracted elf, are you?" "Yes." The beautiful girl with silvery white hair answered expressionlessly. "I am your contracted elf, and also your sword. You are my contractor, and also my master." Saying such a sentence, the holy sword elf who had killed the demon king in the past moved in the direction of Noah, and covered Noah's left hand with the elf mark with an ice-cold little hand. Looking straight at Noah, some indescribable emotions emerged in her eyes. "I hereby swear that your life will be protected by me, and the enemies that obstruct you will be eliminated by me." The holy sword elf who had been sealed for hundreds of years tightly held Noah's hand and said softly, "So, please don't die before me." From this sentence, Noah actually heard a kind of pleading. And from the pitiful eyes of this elf in front of him, Noah also saw a kind of pleading emotion. Noah didn't know why he had such emotions. But, for some reason, in Noah's heart, there was also a kind of sadness that emerged. At this moment, the figure of a girl appeared in Noah's mind. She held a steel sword that shone with silver light in her hand, and had long hair that was as beautiful as golden sand. She was called the Saintess of Salvation by later generations, the girl who saved the entire continent. However, the young lady's figure gradually dimmed. As if she was planning to disappear from this world, bit by bit, she dimmed down. Following the disappearance of the Saintess of Salvation, the sadness in Noah's heart became more and more intense. This kind of emotion caused Noah to hold the delicate hand of the holy sword elf. Paw-dash. Just as Noah was about to reply, the sound of something heavily hitting the ground rang out. He saw Alice, who was standing at the door of her room, staring blankly at Noah and the holy sword elf who were tightly pressed together on the sofa. Her eyes were filled with an expression of disbelief. At Alice's feet, the knight's sword that she didn't have time to wear at her waist fell to the ground with its scabbard, causing the sound from just now. Seeing this scene, the corner of Noah's mouth twitched. He could already foresee what was going to happen next. I misjudged you. As expected, Alice picked up the knight's sword from the ground with tears in her eyes and fiercely pulled it out. You shameless person. Suddenly, in Alice's room, there was a burst of noise that didn't calm down for a long time. Chapter 965. Sigh. Walking in the vast atrium of the Elven Academy, Noah was still sighing about a rather bad and noisy morning. However, that was also something that couldn't be helped. Originally, Noah was already the target of all the pure and innocent young girls in this academy. In the end, such a person was closely attached to a naked beautiful girl. It would be really strange if it didn't cause a commotion. Of course, the commotion was caused, but it was left unsettled in the end. Although Alice seemed to be very excited, it was also because of this that Noah, who felt that the girl wouldn't listen to anything, could only imitate the method he used to meet Alice for the first time. He tied Alice up and threw her in the dormitory before coming out of the dormitory. Probably now, the knights and the Wind King Knights should have gone to the Mole class dormitory to find Alice and liberate her because the leader had not arrived for a long time. However, Noah still remembered the expression on Alice's face when he had tied her up and thrown her into the dormitory. When he had walked out of the dormitory, Alice had looked at him in the last moment. That expression was simply like looking at her husband who had cheated on her. It was full of resentment. Sigh. Thinking of this, Noah couldn't help but sigh. Looking at Noah like this, the elven girl who had been following Noah obediently like a small animal spoke. Master, did I make you angry? In broad daylight, this elven girl who suddenly appeared naturally couldn't appear naked like in the dormitory. Although there was no other man in Alicia Elven Academy other than Noah, it still took a lot of courage to run naked under the sun under the eyes of others. The elven girl didn't feel ashamed in this regard. But Noah didn't dare to imagine what kind of eyes others would look at him with when they saw a naked beautiful and delicate girl following beside him. Therefore, when Noah wanted to take out a set of clothes from his treasury for the elven girl to use, the elven girl transformed her own clothes. It was the same uniform as the students in the Elven Academy. The pure white uniform matched the elven girl's originally fair skin and silver-white waist-length hair. For some reason, it had a particularly perfect feeling. As a result, many students in the surroundings frequently looked over here, pointed at the elven girl, and screamed uncontrollably. That appearance was as if they had seen an extremely cute doll, and only 2 hearts jumped out of their eyes. Unfortunately, with such a cute and beautiful girl by his side, it also made the surrounding students look at Noah with a hint of fear in their eyes. Come to think of it, these students must have thought that the elven girl was the prey that Noah had abducted, right? Noah could only suppress the sigh that surged in his throat for the 3rd time. He shook his head, dispelled other thoughts, and looked at the elven girl. "Don't worry, I'm not you, but how should I call you?" "Aster." The elven girl answered without hesitation. "You can call me that in human language, but my full name can't be said in human language. If you say it in elven language, it will be World Protector Terminus Estate." The elven girl, Aster's words made Noah recall the inscription on the holy sword in the hands of the Saintess of Salvation he saw in his dream. The sword inscription on the holy sword was engraved with the words, Terminus Estate, World Protector, in the elven language. In other words, Noah said with some uncertainty, "Are you really the legendary demon slayer that killed the demon king?" "Yes." Aster's voice became slightly heavy. "Master, you know about me too. I should say, on this continent, there shouldn't be anyone who doesn't know about you, right?" Noah scratched his cheek. "But, because I couldn't summon you, I shared the dream of you and the Saintess of Salvation fighting the demon king together. So, I should know more about you than those who only know about you in legends, right?" But Noah didn't expect that the elven contract that shared the dream with him was actually the highest elven form in human form. One had to know that the highest level elves in human form were extremely rare even in the world of elemental elves, let alone in this world. To put it bluntly, it would be hard for others to see such a highest elven form in their lifetime. And Noah, not only did he see one yesterday, but his own contract elven form was also the highest elven form. This was really unexpected. But this also explained why Noah's strength increased so much when he used Aster's elven device. Aster's strength was indeed very strong. From Noah's point of view, Aster's strength, if calculated by the grade of a relic, was at least the highest grade of grade A relic. It was no wonder that the Saintess of Salvation could defeat the demon king who controlled the 72 pillar elves with such a holy sword. It was not without reason. "But why couldn't I summon you before?" Noah was puzzled. Could it be that there was a problem on your side? As soon as he said this, Aster stopped in his tracks. Noah immediately stopped and looked at Aster. Aster also looked at him. Then, Aster looked straight at Noah and said, "There was a problem. I did encounter some problems, and it was all because of Master." "Because of me?" Noah was stunned. "Although I don't know why, I am sure." Aster slowly extended his hand and placed it on Noah's chest. His gaze was fixated on Noah's body. His eyes flickered with an expression that made one's heart flutter like water. "Master, you have the same strength as me." "Same strength?" Noah was even more puzzled. "What do you mean? Didn't you say that when you contracted with me?" The light in Aster's eyes became more and more intense. There was even a trace of hope in his eyes. "You said that not only can your body reflect all magic, but you are also immune to all kinds of negative energy, including tempering, petrification, weakness, poison, and even curses. They are all useless against you. Could it be that it's not true?" At this moment, Noah could clearly feel it. In Aster's eyes, there was a strong sense of uneasiness. That sense of uneasiness was as if he was worried that Noah was lying to him. Of course, Noah was not lying to Aster. "I do have a body that is different from ordinary people." Noah smiled. "No matter if it is magic or other negative energy, it is useless against me." "Is that so?" The uneasiness in Aster's eyes gradually disappeared and turned into relief. "That's good. What's wrong?" Noah asked curiously. "Is there a problem with my body?" "No, there is no problem. Rather, I am very happy that you have such a body." Aster shook his head and looked at Noah again. "With such a body, you are destined to be the master of me, the world's strongest sword spirit." "The strongest sword sprite?" Noah blinked his eyes. "In other words, you are the strongest among the steel attribute sword spirits, right?" "Yes, Master," Aster said softly. I am the strongest sword spirit. Just like you, I have the highest level of curse resistance that can nullify all magic and negative energy. As long as you are willing, I can even break the contract between other elves, cut apart any elven magic and remove any curse. This is my ability. You have such an ability. Noah was stunned at first, then laughed bitterly. Then we are indeed a good match. So, you are destined to be my master. Aster clenched a small hand and placed it in front of him while looking at Noah. Perhaps, I am also destined to be your master. Noah was a little embarrassed by Aster's straightforward confession. At the same time, Noah's heart was filled with doubts. Even if his body was very similar to Aster's ability, it should not be to the extent of destined to be your master, right? In addition to Aster's previous performance, Noah felt that there must be other reasons for Aster to say such words. There must be other more important and heavier reasons. Chapter 966. Although he didn't know what Aster was hiding, Noah was certain that it wasn't something that could be casually mentioned. Thus, Noah didn't pursue the matter further. But Aster's ability made Noah even more certain that this girl who claimed to be the strongest sword spirit was the legendary demon slayer. Until now, there was still a legend on the continent that the Saintess of Salvation's holy sword pierced through the demon king's heart, destroying the spirit mark on the demon king's body and releasing the 72 spirit pillars that the demon king commanded. If Aster really had that level of resistance to curses, then it wouldn't be impossible for him to break other people's elven mark. And just like what Aster said, Noah also had the same level of curse resistance. The difference was that Aster's resistance to curses was more towards actively eliminating them rather than passively enduring them. And Noah's curse resistance could only be used on his own body and couldn't be released on his own. For example, when others used spirit magic, unless it landed on Noah's body, it wouldn't be nullified. But Aster could actively eliminate the spirit magic of others and even break the curse on others. She could destroy the spirit mark and release the contracted spirit of a spirit envoy. The difference between the two was that one was active while the other was passive. Of course, this was only Aster's ability. When Aster turned into a spirit device, that was when Noah could display his true strength as a spirit envoy. At this time, Noah suddenly realized something. Because Aster had the highest level of curse resistance, she could even eliminate the spirit mark of others. In that case, wouldn't Noah, who also possessed the highest level of resistance to curses and could repel all spells cast on his body regardless of whether they were good or bad, also be unable to brand an elven mark and form a contract with the elves? It seems that Master has already thought of the reason why I can't respond to your summon. Aster seemed to have seen through Noah's thoughts and said so. Master's resistance to curses is different from mine. Not only can it not be used on its own accord, it can only be used as a part of its constitution. It can also repel any spell that is used on the body, whether it is beneficial or not, including the contract with the elves. Hearing this, Noah couldn't help but blame himself for forgetting this. But, Noah couldn't be blamed. In the world of Type Moon, when Noah participated in the Holy Grail War, he successfully formed a contract with a servant and became a master. But at that time, because of the power of the Holy Grail, Noah's body with curse resistance was able to be branded with a command curse and successfully formed a contract with Ryder. Cold Steel Queen, holy sword that slays demons and demons, turn into a sword of steel and bestow me with divine power. When the contracted elven incantation sounded from Noah's mouth, on the back of Noah's hand that was tightly holding onto Aster's little hand, the intricate intertwined elven inscriptions like swords suddenly lit up. Aster's body began to emit a dazzling silver light and gradually turned into light particles in the silver light and gathered in Noah's hand. It didn't take long for the shining silver holy sword to appear in Noah's hand. Noah held it tightly in his hand. Demon Slayer. The highest grade elven equipment created by the strongest sword elves. Its power was even capable of freeing the 72 spirit pillars that King Solomon had enslaved. Now, this power had fallen into Noah's hands after the saintess of salvation's inheritance. Noah did not open his eyes. Instead, he maintained the state of slowly pouring divine aura into the demon slayer and communicated with Aster in his mind. Aster, how do you feel? My condition is very good. Aster's unique low and cold voice sounded in Noah's mind. It's just that Master is using the elven equipment for the second time and has not completely familiarized himself with using me. The infusion of divine aura is only blindly output and does not coordinate with my divine aura, causing the power to be slightly unstable. Is that so? Noah nodded inwardly. Coordinate with your divine aura. With that said, Noah began to adjust the output frequency of his divine might ability. He communicated with the demon slayer at the deepest level, gradually familiarizing himself with the flow of divine might energy in the demon slayer. Then, he instilled his own divine might energy into it at a certain frequency and merged with it. Under such circumstances, the radiance of the demon slayer became more and more dazzling. That's it, Master. Aster's voice sounded at the right time. Slowly feel my inner body. Not only the divine aura, but also the heart. This way, we will be able to display the strongest power. This was where the strength of elven messengers and contracted elves lay. Normally, when summoned, the elves would only attack under the control of the elven messengers. However, once the elves transformed into the elven equipment of the elven messengers and contracted elves would be able to fuse their divine auras together and display a power greater than 1+1. Chapter 967. With Aster's cooperation, he channeled his own holy aura into the demon slayer. Feeling the power of the demon slayer, Noah slowly understood the wonders of the elf device. Unlike normal weapons or even noble artifacts, the elf device was formed by the elf user's contracted elf. Not only did it have life, but it could also cooperate with the elf user. It could also combine the holy aura of both the elf user and the contracted elf to unleash a stronger power than either of them alone. Other elf devices aside, Noah's demon slayer was the elf device formed by the strongest sword elf. In terms of quality and power, in Noah's opinion, it was comparable to the highest level noble artifact in the Gate of Babylon. It might even be better than that. At the very least, the demon slayer was definitely not weaker than the Excalibur. The power of both of them was probably on the same level. However, the elf device and noble artifacts were weapons of different natures. Although the demon slayer was not weaker than the Excalibur, that was only in terms of overall grade. If the Excalibur released its true name and unleashed the true killing power of the City Slayer relic, its power would definitely be stronger than the Demon Slayer relic. However, in its normal state, when it was not releasing its real name, Noah's Excalibur would not be able to compare to the Demon Slayer. For example, Gilgamesh's parting sword was known as one of the strongest noble artifacts, but that was only when it released its real name and unleashed the power that could cut the world apart. If it were to directly use the parting sword to slash someone, that strange noble artifact might not even be as good as an E-grade noble artifact. It was the same logic. Although Excalibur's attack could be said to be extremely destructive when Noah's true name was released, it was just an extremely sharp sword that could cut through iron as if it was mud when Noah's true name was not released. It would not increase Noah's strength at all. The Demon Slayer, on the other hand, was able to merge with Noah's mind. They were compatible with each other, combining the divine power of both the elf user and the contracted elf to unleash a powerful force. After all, although Noah had endless holy aura, its damage output was limited. Although Aster's holy aura was not as terrifying as Noah's, in terms of damage output, it was almost the same as Noah's. This could be seen from the tug-of-war between Noah and Aster's holy aura when they first formed a contract. Under such circumstances, the power of Noah and Aster's holy aura combined together would naturally be stronger than an extremely sharp sword that could cut through iron like it was mud. This might sound a little confusing, but it was actually easy to understand. Let's make an assumption. If Noah's usual strength was assumed to be 100, then with the Excalibur, Noah's strength would increase to 120. However, when Noah released the real name of the Excalibur, Noah's strength would reach 1,000. One could only imagine his strength. Similarly, if Noah's usual strength was assumed to be 100, then with the Demon Slayer, Noah's strength would reach 500. When the real name of the Excalibur was released, the Demon Slayer would not be able to compare to the Excalibur. However, when the real name of the Excalibur was not released, the Demon Slayer would definitely be stronger than the Excalibur. Noah remembered that in his gate of Babylon, there seemed to be a noble phantasm similar to the Demon Slayer. Indestructible Lake, Aroundite. That was the noble phantasm of Lancelot, the most famous knight in the Knights of the Round Table under the Knight King Artoria. It was a pair with the Excalibur. Both of them were entrusted to the humans by the lake spirits. They had the same origin as the Excalibur, and their tenacity was comparable to that of the Excalibur. It was a noble phantasm that would never be destroyed. When using this noble phantasm, whether it was strength, durability, agility, magic, or luck, all of the wielder's ability points would increase by 1 level. Moreover, because this noble phantasm had a legend of killing a dragon, it could also deal additional damage to opponents with dragon attributes. In terms of level, the Indestructible Lake was also a grade A++ noble phantasm. However, this noble phantasm did not require the real name to be released. As long as it was used, it would increase the wielder's strength. The Demon Slayer and the Indestructible Lake could be considered to be similar types of weapons. However, because the Demon Slayer had a life of its own, Aster had taken the initiative to cooperate with Noah, and with the addition of the Holy Aura, the Demon Slayer was stronger than the Aroundite in terms of amplification. Moreover, the sharpness, precision, and toughness of the Demon Slayer were all determined by the amount of divine energy that Noah, the elf, imbued into it. With Noah's divine might and energy, with the Demon Slayer in hand, Noah would even dare to fight Tony, who had the authority of Silver Hand Laceration and Steel Barrier. Of course, whether or not he could win after going all out was another matter altogether. Of course, that was under the condition that he could perfectly utilize Aster's strength. Now, Noah's control and cooperation with Aster had yet to reach a perfect level. As a result, under Aster's guidance, Noah spent the entire day familiarizing himself with the Demon Slayer. That's all for today. When the sky started to turn yellow, Noah stretched and said to Aster, who was beside him, "I'm sorry, Aster, for letting you accompany me for so long. I am Master's sword." Aster said expressionlessly, "Other than Master, I have no reason to spend my time elsewhere." "You can't say that." Noah squatted down and looked at Aster's beautiful eyes. He extended his hand and patted Aster's head. "Aster is not only my sword, but also a spirit with consciousness and willpower. Spirits should be free and unrestrained, dancing and frolicking among the flowers. I also wish to see you, Aster, happy." Hearing this, Aster's eyes moved slightly, but she did not say anything. But, feeling the warmth of Noah's hand on her head, Aster revealed a nostalgic and sad expression. "My previous master, Alicia Edith, also used to pat my head like this." Noah's hand that was patting Aster's head paused for a moment, then continued to pat Aster's head in an even gentler way. "Then, does Aster like this?" Aster did not say anything and only closed her eyes. Her expressionless face revealed a trace of undetectable enjoyment, which told Noah the answer. Noah smiled and didn't stop. He kept stroking Aster's head. A warm atmosphere began to spread. Chapter 968. Not only did the Elven Academy have an elven forest, but it also had a academy city. If the Elven Academy was a castle on a mountain, the Elven Forest was a forest that covered the entire mountain, and the Academy City was a town at the foot of the mountain. Perhaps it would be easier to understand. However, the distance between the Elven Academy and the Academy City wasn't very long. Therefore, usually, as long as there was a holiday or free time, the students of the Elven Academy would come here for leisure and entertainment. Of course, the premise was that the young ladies of the Academy weren't afraid of men. Most of the students were extremely pure and didn't dare to come into contact with men. Unless it was a group activity, very few students of the Elven Academy would come to the Academy City alone to play. Fortunately, there was an Academy City here, so the young ladies of the Elven Academy wouldn't really have no chance to come into contact with men. Otherwise, those young ladies wouldn't just be pure and innocent. They might not dare to come into contact with unfamiliar men for the rest of their lives. At this moment, when the sky was starting to turn yellow, in a corner of the Academy City, on a high platform for tourists to enjoy the scenery of the Academy City, a young lady descended from the sky. Her alluring toes lightly touched the ground before her entire foot landed firmly. The young lady with a pair of pitch-black wings on her back raised her head, exposing her delicate face to the setting sun. If Noah was here, he would definitely recognize her. This young lady with a pair of pitch-black wings on her back was the highest-ranked dark elf called Lustia. Lustia put away the pitch-black wings on her back and opened her eyes that had been tightly shut. She cast her gaze to the front of the platform. There, a figure could be seen standing there. It was a figure who was about the same height as Lustia. She wore an exotic costume that resembled that of a witch. Her long black hair reached her waist, and as the wind blew, her long hair and long sleeves fluttered in the wind. Looking at this figure, Lustia smiled sweetly. "You're late, Lotus." The young lady called Lotus didn't turn around. She was still looking forward, but her tone was as calm as an ancient well. "It's not that I'm late, but you suddenly left my side and came here early." Hearing the words of the girl she called Lotus, Lustia smiled innocently. "I can't help it. I'm just too curious about that male elven envoy named Noah Dole." Apart from King Solomon, throughout the entire history of the continent, Noah was the only male who was able to communicate with elves and form a contract with them. Therefore, after Gray and Vath invited Noah, a male elven envoy, to study in Alicia Elven Academy, Noah's name was destined to spread throughout the continent. Everyone knew about him. Although it had only been half a month or so since Noah had come to this world, it was not enough for his name to be known by everyone. But at the very least, those who were well informed already knew of Noah's existence. Not to mention, Noah's name had already begun to spread throughout the cities of Alicia Empire. Lotus and Lustia happened to be in Alicia Empire. Of course, these two girls also knew of Noah's existence. "As soon as you heard the name Noah Dole, you immediately suggested coming here," Lustia said with a teasing look on her face. "From what I can remember, this is the first time you've been interested in a man, right? Aren't you the same?" Lotus replied without turning her head. "As for my idea of coming here, you agreed without hesitation. You even rushed here before me. Doesn't this prove that you're very interested in that man?" "That's true." Lustia's smile slowly faded as she spoke with a complicated expression. "After all, to you and I, a male elven envoy like Demon King Solomon cannot be ignored. You only care about why he's not a demon king, but can become an elven envoy as a male, right?" Lotus was silent for a moment before speaking with a complicated expression. "And to me, from the moment I was born, my fate has already changed because of that man." As she said this, Lotus pressed a hand on her heart. She felt the throbbing that did not belong to her and suddenly said this. "If your destiny is to guide a male elven envoy like Demon King Solomon, then wouldn't it be better to follow that man?" "And here I thought you were going to say something." Lustia was startled at first, but soon smiled and held Lotus' hand. "Listen carefully, Lotus. My destiny is not to guide a male elven envoy, but to guide the inheritor of the Demon King's power. And you are the Demon King." Lustia emphasized each word. I am the highest-ranking dark elf in charge of guiding the existence of the Demon King, so no one knows better than me that you are the Demon King's successor. But, I am only a person with the Demon King's power in my body. Lotus sighed. The Demon King should be a male elven envoy. I have only inherited his power, but I am not a man. I am not destined to become the Demon King. Whether or not you will become the Demon King is not important. Whether or not you are a male elven envoy is also not important. What is important is that you have the Demon King's power in your body. That is enough. Lustia smiled. Now, I am even more curious. What is the reason that allowed a female like you to inherit the Demon King's power that should have been inherited by a male? In this world, no one understood Lotus better than Lustia. In fact, Lotus did not have a name at first. When Lotus was born, a certain power in her body was awakened for some unknown reason. Lotus' parents, who were ordinary people, saw her as a monster and abandoned her in fear. Because of this power, Lotus was taken in by an orphanage. Chapter 969. Contract Elves. In a pink room in the mole class dormitory of the Alessia Elven Academy, Alice looked at Aster, who was expressionless beside Noah, in shock. She could not believe that this cute girl was an elf. However, this was not strange. The highest elves in human form were very, very rare. Many elven envoys spent their entire lives trying to form a contract with the highest elves in human form, but they could not find one. In the end, they could only wait until their powers as elven envoys declined to nothing as they grew older, and they had no choice but to accept this regret. Of course, it did not mean that elves who did not exist in human form could not be the highest elves. For example, Grey and Vaz's magical elves were also the highest elves, but they did not exist in human form. However, elves who were not in human form were not necessarily the highest elves, but elves in human form were definitely the highest elves. Now, in front of Alice, there was such an existence in human form. She was definitely the highest elven existence. How could Alice not be shocked? You don't believe me? Noah rolled his eyes. Then do you want to see Aster's elven magic device form? That's not necessary. Alice frowned and glared at Noah. But, even if it's a contracted elf, there's no reason to be naked and hug her master, right? Hearing this, before Noah could say anything, Aster lifted his head and suddenly said, "Don't worry. I'm not naked, I'm wearing these socks." Alice was speechless. And Noah also remembered. Indeed. Although in the morning, Aster, who got into his bed, was basically in a state of naked, he still wore knee socks. But, why are you only wearing knee socks? Noah could not help but complain. Isn't that worse than not wearing anything? She didn't wear any clothes, but only wore knee-high socks. Coupled with Aster's pitiful and peerless beauty, it really made one's heart beat faster than not wearing anything. However, after hearing Noah's words, Aster's expressionless face suddenly showed a hint of hesitation and an imperceptible blush. Moss. Master actually wants to see me without knee socks. No. No. Even Master can't. Seeing Aster's shy look, Noah was surprised and at the same time, speechless emotions began to fill his heart. She did not feel shy when she was naked, but she felt shy when she did not wear knee socks. What logic of shame was this? As for Alice, after hearing Aster's words, her eyes widened slightly and turned her head stiffly to look at Noah. You actually let your contracted elf take off her knee socks for you to see. You shameless person. After saying that, Alice immediately wanted to draw her sword, but Noah knocked her on the head with a karate chop in the midst of a bang sound. Instantly, Alice hugged her head and squatted down with tears in her eyes. Can you not be delusional all the time? Can you at least understand the situation before drawing your sword? The corner of Noah's mouth twitched. I really don't know what you witches' brains are made of. There should be a limit to wrongly accusing someone, right? I didn't wrongly accuse anyone. Alice raised her eyes and looked at Noah with some resentment. Undoubtedly, I saw it with my own eyes, is that so? Noah narrowed his eyes and said unhappily. Then did you hear my order for Aster to take off her knee socks? Alice suddenly choked. You can't say anything, right? Noah rubbed his temples and said as if he couldn't take it anymore. Don't do it again, if there's a next time. After thinking for a while, Noah said this directly. If there's a next time, I'll punish you in a very perverted way. After hearing this, Alice's pretty face instantly turned as red as boiling water. She was at a loss for what to do. How can this be? I'm not mentally prepared. Mentally prepared? What mental preparation? I'm not going to use a very perverted way to punish you now. What mental preparation do you need? Just as Noah was speechless at Alice's bewildered look, Aster tugged at Noah's sleeve and looked straight at Noah like an innocent child. If I do something wrong, will Master use a very perverted way to punish me? Noah laughed dryly. He didn't know what to say. At the same time, at the entrance of the Elven Academy, a young girl wearing a witch costume slowly walked out of the elven forest. She arrived in front of the gate and raised her head to look at the vast gate. Is this the Elven Academy, the #1 Elven Envoy training institution in the Empire? The Elven Envoy Academy is named after the Saintess of Salvation. Celestia smiled as if she was helpless. Who would have thought that as the Demon King and the Demon King's elf, we would visit this place one day? I heard that the witch, Gravath, is the dean of this academy. Lotus frowned for the first time, showing an extremely obvious reluctance. I really don't want to see that witch again. Back then, after we escaped from the academy, it was the Twilight Witch who took us in. Lestia revealed something that no one else in the world would ever know. If it wasn't for that witch, you wouldn't have participated in the Elven Sword Dance Festival and won't have the title of the strongest sword dancer and be worshipped by all the Elven envoys. I've never thought of getting that kind of title. Lotus shook her head. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have participated in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Hearing Lotus' words, Celestia's pretty face couldn't help but soften as she held Lotus' hand. So, this time, it's my turn to help you fulfill your wish. Lotus turned her head and exchanged glances with Celestia. Then, she turned her gaze back to the gate and closed her eyes. At the same time, a pitch-black luster bloomed all over Lestia's body. A series of pitch-black feathers reverberated around her body and wrapped around her body. Lestia gradually turned into a ray of light and gathered in Lotus's hand. In the next moment, a knight's sword that looked like a demon's horn appeared in Lotus's hand. It was also pitch-black in color and was surging with ominous pitch-black fog. Vorpal's sword, penetrating truth. It was the highest-grade elven magic device that Celestia, the dark elf who once belonged to Demon King Solomon, transformed into. With this sword, Liana Subble became the strongest sword dancer. Now, this sword that once belonged to the Demon King was finally held tightly in the hands of the Demon King's successor. Just for one person. Boom! In the dormitory of the mole class, Noah, Aster, and Alice, who were still in the room, suddenly heard a loud rumbling sound. Their faces were filled with shock. The commander of the Wind King Knights, who had been reduced to acting cute in front of Noah, quivered and abruptly stood up with a gloomy expression. Don't tell me something happened again. Alice didn't even say goodbye and directly rushed out of the door. Seeing this, Noah frowned. Don't tell me it's that dark elf again. Naturally, no one would answer Noah's question. However, Aster looked outside and said expressionlessly, Master, there's something bad outside. Is that so? Noah's eyes flickered slightly and immediately walked out of the door. Aster, let's go take a look. Yes. Aster responded obediently and followed Noah out of the room. After coming out of the mole class dormitory, Noah immediately saw it. In the direction of the Elven Academy's gate, waves of divine aura energy fluctuations rose, mixed with various kinds of flames, which was unusually conspicuous in the dark night. In particular, there was an extremely powerful divine aura energy that soared into the sky like a star, shaking up waves of air, which made Noah's brows furrow even tighter. It feels like there's a lot of trouble. After saying this, Noah directly took Aster's hand and walked quickly in the direction of the gate that was extremely far away due to the overly vast area of the Elven Academy. Chapter 970. With the help of magic wind elf Smough, Alice rushed over from the air and landed in front of the gates of the Elven Academy. However, what appeared in front of Alice was an unbelievable scene. Alice wasn't the only one who found it hard to believe. Even the students who had rushed over because of the loud noise and gathered in front of the gates of the Elven Academy looked at the scene outside with incredulous expressions. In front of the gates of the Elven Academy, the elven envoys of the Wind King Knights who were supposed to be patrolling the gates were half-bent and panting heavily. However, their eyes were also filled with disbelief. In the middle of the encirclement of the Wind King Knights, there was a young girl who was holding a strange pitch-black knight's sword in her hand. She was wearing a foreign costume that resembled that of a witch. Her jet-black hair that reached her waist swayed in the air. She looked extremely elegant as she looked at everyone present and lightly opened her red lips. "I only want to see Noah Doria. You are not my match. You should obediently withdraw from here." The young girl's crisp voice awakened all the elven envoys who were still in shock. Everyone present reacted. How? How could this be? Alice couldn't help but take a step back and stare at the young girl holding the pitch-black knight's sword. After confirming that she wasn't seeing things, she murmured. Lotus Asubble, it had only been a short 3 years since the girl who was known as the strongest sword dancer in the world had obtained supreme glory. In the library of the Elven Academy, there was even a portrait of the young girl. Even though Lotus' appearance had matured due to the 3 years that had passed, it couldn't be said that she had changed. Among the Elven envoys here, almost everyone had seen the performance of the strongest sword dancer at the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Almost everyone was captivated by Lotus' beautiful sword dance. Thus, who would forget her figure and appearance that left a deep impression on them? In particular, the Vorpal sword in Lotus's hand was known by everyone as the elven magic equipment that belonged to the strongest sword dancer. Thus, everyone here knew who Lotus was. However, it was precisely because everyone knew Lotus that they found it hard to believe. Why? Inside the gates of the Alessia Elven Academy, Claire was also present among the crowd of students, her face filled with disbelief. Aside from Claire, Lindsley, who had brought Carol along, was also present. She stared blankly at Lotus, unable to believe what she was seeing. Why is Lena Schubel here? However, the most unbelievable thing was that the strongest sword dancer didn't seem to be here for a friendly visit. I'll say it again, Lotus said expressionlessly. Have Noah Doria come out. Noah Doria. Alice's expression changed. She bit her lip and took a deep breath. She calmed down and walked forward with a serious expression. Excuse me, why are you looking for a student from our academy? Lotus lifted her head and looked at Alice. She then shook her head gently. It has nothing to do with you. You should leave. I don't want to hurt innocent people. Lotus's words made many people secretly heave a sigh of relief. Even Claire and Lindley, who were in the crowd, felt their hearts relax. So Lena Schubel wasn't an enemy. Alice was the only one who resisted the urge to relax as she spoke to Lotus. If you want to see a student from the academy, you can go through the proper procedures and apply to enter the academy, right? That witch won't let me get what I want if I use that method. Even if she does, she'll have to pay a hefty price. Lotus raised her eyebrows and pointed the pitch-black knight's sword at Alice. Moreover, I didn't come here just to chat. Have that man come out. Everyone could hear the determination in Lotus's tone. She wouldn't give up until she achieved her goal. This made all the elven messengers puzzled. Why was the strongest sword dancer willing to cause such a huge commotion just to see the male elf? That man, Claire said with a bit of irritation. Did he do something bad to Lena Schubel as well? It can't be. Lindsley also couldn't believe it. Did the strongest sword dancer cause such a huge commotion just to see a man? Just as everyone was feeling incredulous, a voice floated into everyone's ears. You're looking for me. Following this voice, Noah walked through the crowd while holding Aster's hand and walked out of the Elven Academy. When Noah and Aster appeared, Lotus's eyes flashed slightly. Even the surface of the Vorpal's sword in her hand flowed with a black light. The difference was that Lotus was acting like this because of Noah's appearance, while Lestia, who had transformed into an elven device, was acting like this because of Aster's appearance. Aster, who was holding Noah's hand, slightly tightened his grip. He stared at the Vorpal's sword in Lotus's hand and said softly, Master, that elf user's elf magic device was once owned by the Demon King. Noah was startled and also looked at the Vorpal's sword in Lotus's hand. It was pitch black in color. A strange aura surged around it like an ominous black gas. That sword was exactly the same as the one Noah saw in Aster's dream when he was in the Demon King's hand during the final battle with the Saintess. Master, please be careful. Aster more or less became serious. That elven envoy isn't an ordinary elven envoy. Even without Aster's reminder, Noah knew. From Lotus's body, Noah could sense a tremendous divine power and powerful aura. That aura was many times stronger than that of Greyvath, who was known as the strongest elven user in the continent. Noah even felt that Lotus's aura was enough to rival Saber, who was the highest level heroic spirit. Do you feel it? Lotus suddenly spoke. This is because of you that I have awakened this power. Because of me. Noah was once again startled. But in the next moment, Noah's eyes suddenly focused. In front of Noah, Lotus gently pressed her empty hand on her heart. Because of Lotus's action, Noah, who was looking at Lotus's heart, saw it almost instantly. He saw the inside of the heart of the girl named Lotus Asubel. It was an incomplete feather that emitted a weak, gentle white light. You. Noah looked at Lotus in surprise. Inside your body, when Claire mentioned Lotus Asubel, Noah had received a hint from the world about the location of the world fragment that was lost in this world. At that time, Noah had already guessed that the world fragment was very likely related to Lotus Asubel. But he didn't expect that the extent of the relationship was to this extent. The world fragment that was lodged in her heart. The girl in front of him was actually the same as Orpheus. Seeing Noah's performance, Lotus's eyes flickered violently and she stared at Noah. You can really see. As soon as her voice fell, Lotus suddenly clenched the elven device in her hand, causing the pitch-black knight's sword to tremble slightly. In an instant, it was enveloped by a dense divine aura. Aster. Noah's eyes focused again, and without hesitation, he imbued the divine aura into Aster's body. Immediately, Aster, who was tightly holding Noah's hand, turned into a burst of light particles and gathered in Noah's hand. In an instant, it condensed into a shining silver steel sword and fell into Noah's hand. In front of him, Lotus, who was tightly holding the pitch-black knight's sword, bounced forward without any warning. She heavily stepped on the ground and turned into a black shadow. The elven device in her hand rapidly condensed a large amount of divine aura, almost fusing with her body. Like a pitch-black bolt of lightning, she cut through the air with a sharp sound and violently shot towards Noah's direction. Chapter 971. Chi. Lotus, who had transformed into a bolt of black lightning, was already faintly discernible. In a flash, she arrived in front of Noah. Immediately, the tip of the pitch-black magic sword in her hand mercilessly shot out like lightning, ruthlessly stabbing towards Noah's chest. Seeing Lotus' lightning-like stab, Noah's expression couldn't help but change. Noah couldn't be more familiar with such lightning-like speed and stab. That was clearly the first move of the absolute sword skill that Grey Vath had taught Noah. Absolute sword skill. Initial form purple lightning. As if intending to confirm Noah's thoughts, Lotus, who had suddenly appeared in front of Noah like a bolt of lightning, lightly opened her red lips and chanted the name of the absolute sword skill. The pitch-black magic sword in her hand mercilessly stabbed towards Noah's chest. Ding! At the critical moment, the silver holy sword that seemed to be the counterpart of the pitch-black demon sword suddenly appeared. Accompanied by a clear sound, sparks flew in the air, blocking the demon sword that the most powerful sword dancer mercilessly pierced through the air. Ah! Seeing Lotus attack Noah, all the elven envoys of the Alicia Elven Academy cried out in alarm. Including Claire, Lindsley, and Alice. Noah, who was holding the silver holy sword, looked at Lotus in bewilderment through the sputtering sparks and the pitch-black magic sword. How did you learn this move? Don't you know? Lotus raised her eyes, met Noah's gaze, and spoke softly. My absolute sword dance was taught by Grey Vath, who has the title of Twilight Witch. After saying this, Lotus didn't give Noah any time to react. The pitch-black magic sword in her hand carried a powerful divine power energy that was like a whistling gale, shaking the air. Along with the vibration of the divine power energy, the pitch-black magic sword in Lotus' hand instantly transformed into beautiful crescent arcs, bringing with it waves of whistling wind. It was as if thousands of soldiers and horses were fiercely attacking Noah, covering the sky and covering the earth as they enveloped Noah. His field of vision was completely covered by the continuous slashes formed by the terrifying sword light. Not only was Noah not surprised, but he also began to calm down. With a leap, Noah took a step back. The demon slayer in his hand seemed to have turned into a gust of wind, surging forward like a violent storm. It welcomed the slash that was like an army of thousands of men and horses that covered the sky and covered the earth. Clang! Clang, clang, clang. Instantly, the two elf envoys wielding the silver holy sword and the pitch-black demon sword were separated from each other by a short distance. Unexpectedly, they both slashed out a torrential storm of slashes. Under the situation where the spectators could barely see streaks of sword light flashing, the continuous collisions were like violent thunderbolts. Waves after waves of overlapping sword and halberd sounds reverberated in the air. In less than 3 seconds, Noah and Lotus had each swung out hundreds of slashes, causing the white and black-colored sword light to fill up the short distance between them. And every time the holy sword and magic sword collided, it would shake up ripples of energy visible to the naked eye and dazzling intense sparks that spread out, causing the air to become chaotic, and the ground to shake up small pieces of gravel. Clang! It wasn't until 2 or 3 seconds later that the holy sword and magic sword, which had completely transformed into sword light that covered the sky and earth, appeared and heavily collided with each other, stirring up an extremely loud sound of swords clashing, and then one after another, they were shaken away. Bang! Almost at the same time, Noah and Lotus, who were shaken away at the same time, landed heavily on the ground, causing a muffled sound. No one could discover it. The moment Noah's and Lotus' feet landed on the ground, a vortex of divine power suddenly gathered under their feet, and then it exploded. With a sharp sound, Noah and Lotus both turned into a bolt of lightning at the same time, rushing toward the opponent in front of them. The silver holy sword and the pitch-black magic sword in their hands carried an astonishing cold light, cutting through the space, erasing the distance between them in an instant. Ding! In the next second, the silver holy sword and the pitch-black magic sword collided with each other with great precision, stirring up a burst of dancing sparks. They collided with each other in the way of sword tip against sword tip. Such a precise thrust was no longer a realm that ordinary humans could achieve. And Lotus, who had made this thrust, was finally surprised. It was because, like Lotus, Noah used a sword skill that should only be used by the continent's strongest elf user and sword dancer. Ultimate sword skill, initial form, purple lightning. However, the surprise only lasted for a moment. In the next moment, Noah and Lotus suddenly let go of the elven device in their hands at the same time. With a small leap, they took a step back and clenched one of their hands into a fist that as if they had agreed, Noah and Lotus clenched their fists at the same time. A burst of divine might gathered into a whirlpool shape. With a whistling sound, the whirlpool heavily smashed into the hilts of the holy sword and the demon sword that were still hovering in midair, maintaining the precision of their sword tips as they collided with each other. Ultimate sword skill. Form 6 Shattered Tooth. From Lotus's sudden attack to the two engaging in a brilliant sword dance, the whole process, not even 10 seconds had passed. By the time the surrounding elf envoys reacted, the brilliant sword dance had already ended and disappeared like a flash in the pan. At this moment, there was only one emotion that filled everyone's heart. Shock. Shock that came from the bottom of their hearts. It was as if Noah and Lotus were looking into a mirror. Their movements were exactly the same. There was not a single difference. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.